Let's bring into the conversation now Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts. He is a combat veteran who served 4 tours with the United States Marine Corps. Congressman, thanks for being with us this morning. So much to cover with you. Want to talk some foreign policy in just a moment. But as someone who obviously takes national security very seriously, how concerned are you about these classified documents in the private possession of Joe Biden?
Look, obviously it's a concern. We have to be very careful with handling classified information. That's something that's important if you're a Marine Corps officer. It's important if you're a member of Congress, and it's certainly important if you're the Vice President or President of the United States. But one of the first things that I learned when I went to Marine training is that you can make a mistake. You can drop out of a run. They'll probably let you try the next day. You can fail a test. They'll probably let you take it again. But you lie about anything, you're gone that afternoon. And the point is that whether you're a trash collector or the President of the United States, people make mistakes. But the test of character is how you handle those mistakes. And there's such a contrast between the way that Donald Trump is handling the situation and the way that Joe Biden is.
Of course there is, and we've laid that out for several days now. That raises the question, Congressman, how you view some of your Republican colleagues right now and the way they're not treating not only this, but the Biden administration as they come in, promising to investigate the IRS, promising to investigate the FBI, promising to investigate the United States military in which you served. What do you make of the posture of the Republican leadership so far?
Well, obviously they're hypocrites when you consider their posture compared to their leader, Donald Trump. But fundamentally, this seems to be a party of lawlessness. I mean, the first legislative priority, the first bill they passed was a bill to enable tax cheats. They say it's good for small businesses and families, but that's only for families that aren't paying their taxes. It's great for if you're a mob family, then great, you have an awesome ally in the Republican Party. They're standing up for the January 6th insurrectionists. They're standing up to the January 6th insurrectionists. They're standing up for Santos. For Santos, who is probably the biggest con man that Congress has ever seen, and that's a pretty low bar. They're standing up for the Russians and Vladimir Putin by trading votes for Ukraine aid. And it's also useful to see who they're not standing up for, because they're not standing up for law enforcement. They're going after the FBI for doing their job at Mar-a-Lago. They're not standing up for women who want to simply exercise their basic rights to make decisions about their own health care. They're not standing up for our troops, who are working really hard to support the Ukrainians in their fight for freedom. So this is a party of lawlessness right now, and it's embodied by their leadership.
Well, let's talk about that fight for freedom in Ukraine, Congressman. The fighting in Ukraine, about 11 months old, nearing the 1-year mark next month. Ukrainian officials now warning of a new, possibly large-scale offensive by Russia. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has some details now from Kyiv.
The battles raging in Ukraine's east have laid waste to the city of Soledar. Ukraine's military said the city hasn't fallen to Russians, but said they've killed more than 100 Russian troops. But even after months of ferocious fighting, Ukraine's 800-mile-long front lines have been mostly frozen, literally and figuratively. This war is waiting for a game changer, and top Ukrainian officials are warning Russia is planning one, a new offensive that could be just weeks away. The current masters of Russia will throw everything they have left and everyone they can muster to try to turn the tide of the war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky warned last week. Some officials even believe Russia could make another move on the capital, Kyiv, from neighboring Belarus. Over here, Russian and Belarusian troops were seen training just across Ukraine's northern border as recently as 2 weeks ago. Anton has been tracking Russian moves across the border for months. We see Russians regularly making fortifications, he told me, and in my opinion, they may be expecting an offensive from us. Russian President Vladimir Putin even visited Belarus 2 weeks ago, his only trip abroad since the start of the war, and glad-handed with Belarus's president, one of Putin's only remaining allies. On the first day of the war in February, Ukraine destroyed this bridge over the border, forcing Russian troops to take the long way to the capital. And since Russia's first failed attack on Kyiv, Ukraine has been preparing for a second. So this is in anticipation of another offensive.
Якщо брати в цілому,
Russian forces were in this area of responsibility, he said, and now we're preparing for the potential scenarios that may come. So this trench is unused. It was built in April after the initial Russian invasion. And you can see it's all fresh timber, waiting for a fresh offensive. But the threat could come from anywhere. Back in Kyiv, one of Ukraine's top intelligence officials told me he expects a Russian offensive to target the eastern part of Ukraine. Where and when do you expect this new offensive?
ми зараз
We're now focused on the reserves and groupings of troops that Russia is putting in the temporarily occupied territories, he told me. We're talking about the winter-spring period in the three main directions, Donbass, Kharkiv, and Zaporizhia. Whether Russia's new offensive succeeds or fails, Ukrainians believe Putin's other foot is about to drop. Matt Bradley, NBC News, Kyiv, Ukraine.
So, Congressman, some of your Republican colleagues have been skeptical of not necessarily always supporting Ukraine, but of the amount of support, how much money the United States taxpayers have given to Ukraine in support of this effort. Why do you think it's important to continue?
It's important to continue because this is a long-term investment in our own national security. If there's one lesson we should have learned from Vladimir Putin over the last 10 years, is that he's not going to stop. He's not going to stop after Georgia. He's not going to stop after Crimea. He is going to keep going. And if he keeps going after Ukraine, it could well be into a NATO ally. That means American troops are in the fight and American lives will be lost. So yes, we're spending some good money. We're investing some good taxpayer money in Ukraine, but there's a great return on that investment. It's going to save us money in national security in the long term.
Democratic Congressman Seth Moulton of Massachusetts. Congressman, thanks for your time this morning. We always appreciate it.
Good to see you.